Hello, scholars. This is Mr. Miller with Unit 2 Review Part 2. Part 1 is also on my website, millersworldhistory.weebly.com. And let's go ahead and get started. So, where we last let off in Part 1 was the crossroads of trade. So, I just want to quickly review over what a crossroads of trade is. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's very important that you understand what a crossroads of trade is. So, remember, that's the area where the Silk Roads all meet, where you have Asia, Europe, and Africa being connected by this region. All right, it's a very wealthy region. Remember, you have Constantinople right here, which is with the Byzantine Empire, but also it was controlled by the Islamic Empire once they took over in this region right here. All right, both of those empires became very wealthy and very diverse because of this crossroads of trade. Remember, crossroads is just kind of like an intersection. It's kind of like an intersection. So remember what crossroads of trade is. Now, along this crossroads of trade, you're going to have a major city. Now, one of the major cities is called Mecca. All right, Mecca is going to be located right here along this crossroads of trade. All right, along this area. Mecca is the holy city of Islam. All right, remember, this is the city where Muhammad actually was born, and along with that, when he came back, his journey there actually marked the beginning of Islam, which is why Muhammad created Islam as the founder of Islam. Muslims are required to take a pilgrimage there at least once in a lifetime. This pilgrimage is called what we call the Hajj. All right, the Hajj, or also known as the Hijrah. All right, so this pilgrimage, which is basically meaning a journey, you go to it, you go into this area, and you walk around here 7 times, and you go in, you pray, and this is kind of their holy city. They go back here to Mecca, which is their holy city, if you're Islam, if you are a Muslim. Now, this requirement, this pilgrimage, is actually part of the 5 pillars of faith. All right, this is the moral code for Muslims. Now, just kind of like how the 10 Commandments is the moral code for Judaism, Jesus' teachings is the moral code for Christians. 5 pillars of Islam is the moral code for Muslims. These are the people who follow Islam. Now, the 5 pillars of Islam are faith, prayer, which is usually 5 times a day. They pray 5 times a day. Fasting, which means you go without eating, usually during the month of Ramadan. Almsgiving, which is also called charity, like you give charity to the poor. And also the Hajj itself, the pilgrimage, all right, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, within this 5 pillars of Islam, we are able to kind of see where Islam was at in the world, right? Like if we see people following this moral code, we know that Islam is there. So one of the people who we have not talked about in depth in this unit, but something that is going to be on your test, is Mansa Musa. Now, Mansa Musa was an African king of the Mali Empire, but he brought Islam to Africa. Now, how do we know that he brought Islam to Africa? Is because he goes on the Hajj. He goes on this journey to the holy city of Mecca, and then comes back and shows people how rich Africa is and how rich his kingdom is. All right, he's actually said to be the richest man in the world, and he is a follower of Islam, and he is going on his journey to the Hajj. So if you see anybody on this test that say, hey, they're going to the Hajj, they're going to Mecca, you automatically know that, hey, they follow Islam. They are of Islam. They're Muslim. They're a Muslim. Okay. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about feudalism and manorialism again. So remember feudalism. All right, this is kind of our social structure, our political structure of feudalism. All right, so remember, feudalism is a political structure in medieval Europe. Remember, medieval Europe being the western side of Europe, where lords gave land to tenants. By tenants, I mean people who live there in exchange for services. So right here we kind of see where you have, if you are somebody of nobility or somebody who is like up in the top, you're giving land to somebody below you. You're giving land or protection to somebody below you, all right? And if you're somebody who is at the bottom, or at the bottom somebody, where you're given in exchange for that land is going to be food and services and loyalty and protection. All right. So ultimately, feudalism is this political structure where you have land in exchange for loyalty, fees, and services that you give. All right. Where lords have the land and tenants are on the land. Now remember, feudalism, where you're born is usually where you're dying, all right? It is not mobile. It is not mobile in any sense. It is very strict structure, all right? Except unlike Hinduism, where it's based on religion, feudalism is all based on land. The most important thing in feudalism is where you're born and what land you have. Remember those two things. That feudalism is a political system where you have land given in exchange for services, and it is all where you are in feudalism is going to be based on your birth and also based on how much land your family has. Okay, now along with feudalism you have an economic system. Now the economic system is called manorialism. So remember that during this time period it was kind of chaotic. It was super unsafe for you to be able to go on long journeys for trade. So because of that, they created a manor. All right, a manor being a large piece of land to have a self-sufficient economy. All right, which self-sufficient means independent, which means you don't have to trade. All right, and this takes the place of large international trade. Manorialism is going to be super small and super local. All right, most people don't even leave past 2 miles past on their manor. All right, they usually were born on their manor and they die on their manor. All right, and remember, it's a self-sufficient economic system. By economic system, we're talking about trade. All right, so feudalism, think about a political system within Western Europe. With manorialism, you're thinking about an economic system where you have these small, independent manors where are self-sufficient. All right, so those are our two isms of this unit. Now, other terms you need to know for feudal Europe, all right? Medieval Europe, feudal Europe, all right? These are all on the west side, all right? Remember, the east side, you have the Byzantine empires, they're the beasts of the east. The west side, we're talking about feudal Europe or medieval Europe. You have lords, all right? Lords are wealthy people who give their land in exchange for services, all right? The lords have a vassal. Now, what is a vassal? This might be the first time you heard of a vassal. A vassal are going to be your knights and also your peasants. Those are people who are given land and performs the services. These are the people who are doing. These are our tenants, right? So lords are the people who are giving the land to the vassals who does the services for their lord. Okay. Now, along with that, you also have guilds. Okay, so guilds are on the manors, and remember, manors are super small. So these are super small organizations of workers who come together and they try to set uniform standards. All right, back in medieval Europe. Okay, so we're going to see kind of something like this later on in our history classes. But just remember that when we talked about guilds, we're talking about organization of workers. So you might have a group of blacksmiths over here. You might have a group of field workers over here. You might have a group of sword makers over here. Everybody kind of get into groups so they can say, hey, this is how you build this correctly. This is how we do things, okay? And also along with that, you also have chivalry. Now, chivalry, remember, is a code of honor. All right, code of honor and loyalty for European knights. Now, who are knights? Remember, knights are the warriors. These are the warriors that are fighting in feudal Europe, in the western part of Europe. Okay, so lords are, remember, recap, lords are the wealthy people who give land. Vassals are given land and perform services. Guilds are organization of workers. They are the organizations of workers who are in the manor. And then chivalry is going to be your code of honor. It's going to be loyalty to your European knights. All right. If you need any more questions, feel free to email me or ask me them in class. Now, big review things, some things that we might need to review over. All right, so Neolithic Revolution, this is from Unit 1. You do have a review section on your Unit 1 test. Neolithic Revolution, remember, this is when people stop hunting and gathering and they start getting farms. All right, they start farming, and they start also domesticating animals, which means you're making animals good for work. All right, this is an example of a Neolithic village back in the time. All right, remember the Neolithic Revolution is if you stop hunting and gathering, you settle down, you start creating settlements. By settlements, it's just an example of towns and cities. All right, all settlements are just places where people are permanently located. I'm not hunting and gathering, moving from place to place. I'm creating a permanent home. All right, and that's the Neolithic Revolution. They start farming, domesticating animals. They stop hunting and gathering. All right, they stopped hunting and gathering. They created settlements. Now, another portion of this review is also the Fertile Crescent, right? So Fertile Crescent is going to be where we see these settlements start to first take place in the Neolithic Revolution. This Fertile Crescent is between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, which is right here in current day Iraq, and it also is home to Mesopotamia. And now remember that fertile, when we talk about fertile, we're talking about meaning good for growing, all right? It means very good for growing and able to reproduce, okay? So make sure we understand that Fertile Crescent was where Mesopotamia is, and is where the Neolithic Revolution kind of had to start, when people started creating settlements, okay? Now, all along this, we have the Silk Road, all right? So remember the Silk Road from Unit 1. The Silk Road are just trade networks that link China with Europe. This is a trade network that links China with Europe. Now, the Silk Road is not one road, all right? It is a network of trade routes, all right? A network of these pathways that people took, all right? As you can see, there's more than one road, right? And some of them is even through sea. Now, this reason why we remember Silk Road is because this is these massive cultural diffusion. And remember, cultural diffusion is the spread and blending of culture. So all these cultures are spreading and blending together in cultural diffusion. And remember that this is all kind of happening in the focal point in this crossroads of trade that we talked about at the beginning of the video. All right, Silk Road, cultural diffusion. Make sure we remember that. Okay. Now, the mandate of heaven. This is going to be the last slide we go over in this video. Probably next to last slide because I still have a few more minutes. The mandate of heaven is a Chinese belief. It is in China. And all the mandate of heaven is that you, a ruler, needs to have permission or a mandate from the gods to rule over the people. So this is not saying that this is actually like a permission that is given, like people don't see them get permission, but they do kind of see that if you're a ruler, that you clearly are favored by the gods, okay? So this mandate of heaven is used to explain what we call the dynastic cycle. So this is when you have, this is the dynastic cycle, all right? So you see here is just the rise and fall of dynasties. So at the very top, you have a strong dynasty start to happen. However, over time, you start to have a decline, all right? You start to have decline because things aren't going too well. Then disasters start to strike, and people say, hey, that old dynasty sucks, all right? It's lost the mandate of heaven. So then they overthrow it, and then they create a new dynasty, and then that's a strong dynasty. So remember how we figure out this, right? Think about the Lion King, right? So you have Scar in the beginning. He's a strong dynasty. People kind of like him, and he takes over Pride Rock. But as time goes on, you see it start to decline, right? Like in the Lion King, the things start to grow. You have the hyenas taking over, and people are super unhappy, right? And because we find out Scar is a bad guy, all these disasters start to happen on Pride Rock, and then eventually people realize, crap, Scar is terrible. Then Simba comes up, he overthrows him and ends in a rebellion. He creates a new dynasty with Nala, and he is now part of that top of the dynasty cycle. So what Lion King is reflecting is the Chinese dynasty cycle that's explained by the mandate of heaven, right? The mandate of heaven being permission from the gods to rule over the people. That all comes from China, right? So that's just how Disney kind of stole some things to kind of help make their narrative, to help make their story of the Lion King. They stole it from China, the mandate of heaven, to explain the dynastic cycle, the rise and fall of dynasties. The rise and fall of dynasties is what the dynastic cycle is. Now, some other key terms that you need to know. Direct democracy. Remember, direct democracy was a government created in Athens. So these are some Athenians. If you notice from the picture, right, they're all men, right? They're all men. So women were not allowed to vote. However, this is the first time we actually see we see people being able to vote. And this concept of power to the people, this concept of democracy, in which everybody votes, or they try to get everybody who they consider people and equals to vote. All right, so we understand that it is not a fair system. In no way is it a fair system, but this is the first time we get democracy, which is something that we use in America today, right? The fact that we feel like we need to go and vote. When we think of democracy, think of ancient Greek and think of voting. All right, and remember that Greek practice was preserved by the Byzantine Empire. All right, direct democracy, you're getting people to vote. Okay. Now, the last thing we're actually going to slow our roll there, and we're going to get into world religions, which is going to be one of the last slides of this whole video series. But make sure that we kind of understand direct democracy. Make sure we understand Mandate of Heaven and the dynastic cycle in China. The Silk Road being a major player in diffusion, and along with that, the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, and the Neolithic Revolution. Those are going to be your review things that you're going to need to know for the review section of the test, along with some other things that we're going to get into later on in the videos.